Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Poor secretary rents boyfriend for $500, but it's a wealthy CEO who changes her life. Grace Miller had never been the kind of woman who stood out. She didn't wear loud heels that clicked through the halls, or flashy suits that drew attention. At 30, she worked as an administrative secretary on the 42nd floor of the Hartwell Tower, a glass and steel skyscraper that pierced the Manhattan sky like a finger pointing at power. Hartwell and Company wasn't just a financial investment firm, it was a fortress of wealth, a temple where the destinies of entire fortunes were decided. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., Grace left her tiny Brooklyn apartment. She walked the still dark streets, wearing a scarf pulled up to her nose in winter or a subway fan for any breeze in summer. She took the F train, then transferred in Lexington, caught between the smell of coffee and the broken conversations of people in a hurry. For nearly an hour, she observed the tired faces around her, like a mirror of her own routine. Her hair was always tied in a simple bun, sometimes held in place by an old pen if she hadn't had time to look for a hair tie. Her flat shoes had seen 1,000 sidewalks. She held her coffee cup like armor against the anonymity of the world. Not because she particularly liked coffee, but because it kept her hands busy and gave the illusion of going somewhere with a purpose. In Hartwell's immaculate hallways, she greeted everyone with a small smile. She knew the first names of the receptionists, the delivery people, the maintenance staff. But no one ever remembered hers. To arrogant young analysts and busy managers, she was just the secretary, or she over there. She printed, filed, and forwarded calls without ever raising her voice. Discreet. Efficient. Invisible. Her desk was tiny, wedged between a supply closet and the service elevator. A small frame sat there, containing a photo of her and her mother, taken long before illness confined her to a chair. The rest of the time, Grace focused on her tasks with almost military rigor. Not because she loved her job, but because she didn't have the luxury of complaining. She earned barely enough to cover her rent, send a little money to her mother in Queens, and buy generic drugs when the brand name ones were too expensive. Making ends meet was a tight equation, a calculation of avoidance: avoid the heat breaking down, avoid overdrafts, avoid expensive dreams. Her small apartment, though old, was always clean. The walls were bare except for a rough-hewn wooden shelf lined with paperbacks, classic novels, often bought secondhand from the $1 aisles. Jane Austen, Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou. She read to escape, to remind herself that there was a world where women could be seen, heard, desired. And yet, every evening when he closed his book, reality returned like a silent slap. She lived on the fringes of a world she didn't really understand, one of gala dinners, gold watches, and stifled laughter over glasses of champagne. A world where women wore expensive dresses, where men measured their worth by the size of their bonuses. This world paraded before her eyes every day, in the corridors of Hartwell and Company, like a theater for which she couldn't afford to buy a ticket. She had resigned herself to staying backstage, watching the lights without ever going on stage. But what she didn't know yet, was that a sincere look, at the right time, could change everything. One Thursday morning, as Grace meticulously filed files in the cramped financial department's filing room, her phone vibrated in the pocket of her beige jacket. She almost didn't answer it. Personal calls were frowned upon during business hours, but the screen displayed a name she hadn't seen in months: Amanda, sister. Her heart sank. She hesitated for a second, took a deep breath, then picked up. Hello? Grace. Amanda's voice was as cold as a work email that I'm getting married in 3 weeks. Send me your address and I'll send you the invitation. No hello, no how are you? Typical. Oh. Well, congratulations, Amanda. That's fast, isn't it? Grace murmured, trying a light tone. We don't all need years to find someone. The jab was subtle but sharp anyway. You're my sister, so of course you're coming. Then, a pause, followed by an annoyed sigh. You're not going to embarrass us, are you? I put your name on the table with Connor. Grace froze. The name echoed like thunder in the small, quiet room. Connor. Her ex. The one she had loved deeply, naively. The one who had left her after 2 years of relationship. With this sentence she had never forgotten. You're sweet, Grace, but you have no ambition. I want a woman who pushes me upwards, not a girl who lives in a bedsit and reads Jane Austen like it'll change the world. He left without a backward glance, and shortly afterward, he appeared on social media with Heather Williamson, a brilliant lawyer from a large firm, perfect down to her fingertips. An engagement had been announced 6 months earlier. And now, Amanda had placed her at the same table as him? Intentionally? Grace felt a lump in her throat. She suddenly felt like that teenager in her bedroom, hiding her tears after her high school classmates had laughed again at her plain clothes or her weird books. But this time, it was pride, wounded, stung to the quick, that took over. I'll come, with my boyfriend. The sentence came out of her like a spontaneous defense, a lie thrown into the sea to avoid sinking. There was silence on the other end of the line. Amanda, clearly surprised, continued in a more mocking tone. Oh? You're in a relationship now? That's unexpected. Yes. His name is Alex. He's wonderful. She was making it up as she spoke, but she did it with all the dignity she could muster. It wasn't about impressing Amanda. It was about not letting herself be trampled on again. Not this time. Good. I can't wait to meet him. He'd better make a good impression. The tone was acidic, dripping with skepticism. Then Amanda hung up, as if she'd just checked off a box on her bridal to-do list. Grace stood there for a moment, the phone still to her ear. Around her, the metal cabinets, the beige files, the smell of dusty paper, everything suddenly seemed cramped. She had just committed a madness. She didn't have a boyfriend. Let alone a man willing to accompany her to a posh wedding in 3 weeks. And yet, a part of her smiled. Perhaps it was finally time to take back control. To step out of the shadows. Even if it meant hiring a stranger. That evening, a light rain drummed against the windows of Grace's apartment. The Brooklyn sky, gray and heavy, seemed to have matched her mood. She had come home from work later than usual, her heart empty from her sister's call, her stomach knotted by the thought of seeing Connor again, hand in hand with his perfect fiancé. Sitting on her old sofa, her legs tucked up, Grace clutched a half-cold cup of tea in her trembling hands. The living room was silent except for the distant crackle of the tired radiator. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry, until her gaze fell on an old photo album. She opened it at random. A picture of her and Amanda as children on the beach at Coney Island. Amanda was already smiling like a star. Grace, on the other hand, was holding a plastic shovel, focused, self-effacing. The more she flipped through it, the more she felt the pain swell. She thought back to Amanda's words. You're not going to embarrass us, are you? And to Connor's. You're sweet, Grace, but you have no ambition. She was tired of being ashamed. Tired of always being the one everyone looked down on. Tired of being alone. So, in a fit of impulse she couldn't really explain, she grabbed her laptop, opened her browser, and typed, with guilty hesitation. Discreet Event Escort New York. She came across a website with a simple, almost administrative interface. A little-known platform used by wealthy people seeking respectable companions for social events. No flirtatious profiles. No suggestive photos. Just simple, anonymous, professional ads. His heart was beating faster. She wasn't that kind of woman. She'd never paid for anyone's company. But she also didn't want to endure, once again, the silent humiliation of arriving alone at a reception where every glance would be a slap in the face. She clicked, create an ad. Then, with trembling hands, she typed. Seeking companion for wedding weekend. Acting skills required. Role, loving, discreet, elegant boyfriend. Compensation, $500. No physical contact required. Just presence, respect, and a little human warmth. She hesitated, reread it 3 times, felt ridiculous, but clicked send. Then, overcome by a mixture of shame and nervousness, she closed her computer, grabbed a blanket, and collapsed on the couch, exhausted. She fell asleep in front of an old black and white movie, her face wet with tears. The next morning at 6:15 a.m., while she waited for the water to heat up in her tiny bathroom, she automatically opened her email inbox. About 30 messages had arrived overnight. She scanned them quickly. Some were too familiar. Too insistent. Others seemed strange, even disturbing. She was about to close the tab when a message caught her eye. On. No mistakes. No flattery, no emojis. Just a few lines, disarmingly elegant. Hello, Grace. My name is Alex. I will be punctual, elegant, respectful, and professional. I understand the importance of discretion and playfulness. It will be an honor to accompany you. Please feel free to send me the details. Yours faithfully, Alex R. Something about that message froze her. He didn't ask any inappropriate questions. He didn't try to charm her. He wrote like a confident man, but without arrogance. His tone suggested someone who was used to moving in distinguished circles, but who had nothing to prove. Grace reread the message 3 times. Then again. She felt her heart soften for a moment. She hesitated. For a long time. She placed her fingers on the keyboard. Withdrew them. Got up. Paced the kitchen. And then. She replied. Hello, Alex. Thank you for your message. The wedding is in 3 weeks on Long Island. I will send you details of the location and times. Please keep me informed of your availability. Grace, ***. She pressed send. Maybe she had just done something completely crazy. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a little alive. The wedding day arrived with a brilliant sky over Long Island. The sun beat down on the freshly cut lawn of a vast colonial-style villa, whose white columns stood proudly at the entrance. Guests arrived in black sedans and luxury cars, in a parade of elegance that would have intimidated anyone. Another black sedan approached. Discreet, without a uniformed driver or fanfare. Inside, Grace clutched her sweaty hands in her lap. Her midnight blue dress, carefully chosen from a second-hand shop, accentuated her slim figure, and her light makeup revealed a beauty that the weariness of everyday life had long erased. When the car stopped, she took a deep breath and got out, panting, her eyes a little misty. She still wasn't sure if she was going to collapse from nervousness or relief. Then the passenger door opened. And she saw it. Alex. He stepped out fluidly, like a man in perfect control of himself. Charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, dark tie knotted with precision. His gaze was frank, direct, yet strangely soothing. No forced smile, no nervousness. He stood straight, as if he belonged wherever he went. Hello, Grace. His voice was deep, calm. Thank you for trusting me. We're going to have a great weekend. I'm glad to be here. She blushed in spite of herself and briefly placed her hand in his. His touch was warm, assured. Nothing in his demeanor betrayed the slightest embarrassment. He wasn't playing Prince Charming, he embodied serenity. On the walk from the parking lot to reception, they walked side by side. But instead of reciting a script as she'd expected, Alex engaged in a gentle, sincere conversation. Tell me, Grace, what are you reading right now? She looked at him, surprised. Pardon? You seem like a passionate reader. And I've always loved people who have worlds inside them. She smiled, slightly unsettled. Beloved, by Toni Morrison. I'm rereading it for the 3rd time. He nodded. Powerful. Poetic. Brilliant. He paused. And do you have a passion that no one here knows about? Something that makes you happy when everything else falls apart? She didn't have a ready-made answer. He wasn't trying to seduce her. He was trying to z. And in that look, she had never been so visible. As soon as they entered the gardens, all eyes turned towards them. Amanda, in her custom-made ivory gown, wore a fixed smile. She approached, arms outstretched toward her sister, but her eyes immediately slid to Alex. She looked him up and down, a crease of surprise forming between her brows. "So, is this him, Alex?" she said, emphasizing the name slightly, as if she doubted that such a sophisticated man was actually in a relationship with her sister. Alex smiled calmly and squeezed his hand. "Nice to meet you, Amanda. Your sister has told me so much about you. I'm delighted to be here for your special day." Amanda looked at him for a few seconds, silent. For the first time in a long time, she didn't find nothing to say. During the reception, Alex played his role to perfection, but with an almost disturbing elegance. He told anyone who would listen that he had met Grace in a neighborhood bookstore in Williamsburg. "I saw her pick up a copy of Faulkner, and I thought someone who read that deserved to be listened to talk for hours." Everyone was laughing. And she was laughing too, but because, for the first time, she felt up to it. Not just because of Alex's acting, but because he made her feel alive. He placed a light hand on the small of her back as they walked. He held her gaze when they spoke. He wasn't trying to impress her, Hess supported. Even the most demanding guests seemed won over. Aunt Barbara, always the first to judge, whispered to her husband. "There's something special about this boy. He oozes power. He's not just any boyfriend, this one." While everyone was dancing, Grace spotted Connor in the distance. He was holding his fiancée's hand, Heather, but his gaze remained fixed on her and Alex. He didn't dare approach. And that's enough, she didn't need revenge. The scene spoke for itself. Later that evening, after dinner, the sun slowly set over the property. Fairy lights flickered gently in the trees, casting a golden glow on tired faces. The garden smelled of lavender and roses. Grace and Alex had moved away from the commotion, walking slowly along the stone walkway. She stopped near a small pond, her gaze lost in the reflection of the rising stars. "You're a really good actor, you know." She looked at him gently. "You play this role as if it were natural, as if you do this every day." He looked at her in silence for a moment. Then, slowly, he answered. "What if I don't play?" His voice wasn't theatrical or provocative. Just real. She looked at him, puzzled. But he said nothing more. He offered her a simple smile, then looked up at the sky. She didn't understand yet. But one thing was certain, this weekend was going to change something. In her. And maybe, between them. 2 days later, back in Manhattan. The sun filtered through the blinds of Grace's small apartment, but she couldn't see it. She had resumed her routine, files to sort, coffee to make, calls to forward. But something had changed. Inside her. Like a gentle fire still burning beneath the ashes. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alex again. His warm smile, his honest gaze, the way he asked her questions as if her answers really mattered. It wasn't just an act. That weekend, she had felt important. Admired. Alive. But she also knew how to keep her feet on the ground. All of this was a deal. $500. A service well executed. He probably hadn't even thought about her since. So she buried it all. She resumed her discreet posture, her simple clothes, her efficient gestures. Monday morning arrived. The company was buzzing with unusual excitement. An internal memo had circulated at dawn, exceptional presence of the CEO at headquarters today. All departments must send a representative to the conference room. A rare occurrence. The CEO? Grace had only ever seen his signature, at the bottom of certain confidential documents. He was said to be young, brilliant, elusive. Always between planes, rarely in the office. Out of curiosity, and because she had finished filing the morning's notes, she headed towards the conference room. She slipped discreetly into a corner, behind two chatty colleagues. The murmuring stopped when a man entered through the side door. And there, Grace felt her breath catch. Her throat tighten. It was him. Alex. He walked confidently up to the stage. Dark suit, crisp white shirt, midnight blue tie. Nothing ostentatious. Just the calm elegance of someone with nothing to prove. "Hello everyone," he said in a clear, calm voice. "I am Alexander Reed, president of Hartwell and Company. I wanted to meet you personally. This company exists thanks to your work." Silence. Only the suppressed breaths could be heard. Grace blinked in disbelief. Her mind refused to connect the two images, the smiling man holding her hand on Long Island, and the tycoon everyone listened to reverently. He looked around the room. And when his eyes met Grace's, something happened. A tiny smile. A wink. Subtle. Almost imperceptible. But for her. His heart began to beat faster. She stepped back, trembling slightly. What does that mean? She thought. Why hadn't he said it? Why the silence? And, why that look? A whirlwind of emotions took hold of her, anger, shame, incomprehension, but above all, a burning curiosity. Who was Alexander Reed really? And why, after that perfect weekend, had he agreed to remain a mystery? The next morning, as Grace sat down at her small desk, still troubled by the revelation of the previous day, aping a sound made her jump. An email. Object, new assignment, confidential. Madame Grace Miller. You are invited to join the office of the President as a special executive assistant. Your discretion, integrity, and potential have been noted. Please report to the 45th floor promptly at 9 a.m. Office of the President, Hartwell and Company. She reread it 3 times, unable to believe it. Her heart was pounding. The 45th floor? That was where only senior executives and managers had access. She never imagined she'd set foot there, much less work there. Dressed in her best business attire, sober, impeccable, slightly trembling, Grace boarded the elevator alone, her eyes fixed on the scrolling numbers. When she arrived, the president's receptionist greeted her with a genuine smile. "He's waiting for you, Mrs. Miller." She walked into the vast glass-fronted office. The view of Manhattan was spectacular. And there, standing there, in a light gray suit, as confident as ever. Alex. Or rather, Alexander Reed. He stepped forward, holding out his hand as if on the first day. "Hello, Grace. I don't understand. You weren't supposed to recognize me this weekend. But you did. You saw me for who I was, not for what I represented." She looked at him, moved, confused, but strangely serene. "This position," he added calmly, "is not a gift. You earned it. You worked hard. You are loyal. Discreet. Brilliant. I don't just want someone competent by my side. I want someone who sees beyond the costume." Grace felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders. This was real. Not a dream, not a game. She would now occupy a role she thought was reserved for another category of women. Women who were wealthier, more confident, more visible. But that day, everything changed. She entered a world she thought was forbidden. She discovered the boardrooms where important decisions were made, the private lunches with investors, the behind-the-scenes workings of an empire she knew only through photocopies and emails. And by his side, Alex remains. Present, discreet, constant. He didn't shape her. He never treated her like a woman to be saved, that he simply revealed it. 1 year later. On a Tuscan estate one golden afternoon, Alex and Grace attended a close friend's wedding. This time, there were no roles to play. No lies. No pretenses. Alex held his hand proudly. When asked, "And you too, how did you meet?" he smiled and simply replied. She was looking for someone to pretend with. I found someone who showed me what it was like to be true. He introduced her as the woman of my life. And Grace, in her light ivory dress, looked at him with the same gentleness she had had in the illuminated garden a year earlier. To those who think they are invisible, forgotten, or unimportant, sometimes all it takes is one person to really look at you, really listen to you, to change your whole story. And sometimes the best role you're offered is just the very first chapter of your truth.